Clark Judge.
I'm looking for Clark Judge. It's Mike Richards calling from Raw. Mike Richards, how you doing,
Mike.
buddy? Hey, great.
Good, I'm doing fine.
We just played a great moment for the Leafs, but we had to go back 40 years. We went back to the Lanny McDonald overtime goal against the Islanders because for Leaf fans, they need something today. They're a little down. Not that, do you feel bad for Leaf fans? Do you have that in you as a Hab fan? Do you feel sorry for them?
Yeah, I do, because I hate the Bruins. That's why. And I wanted to. I really want to see a Canadian team go deep into the playoffs. I really do, and I thought Toronto could win this series, but yeah, it was tough to watch that third period. That made me feel sad. Anyway, It made me sort of think about Montreal all over again. Like, there we go, another Canadian team leaving the playoffs. But no, I do feel sorry for him. I do. But now I moved on to the Yankees. Yeah, 9 straight. Thank you.
Yeah, 9 in a row.
So it's good in the Clark Judge world. It's a happy household
because
because of the Yankees.
Yeah, it was a miserable winter here for numbers of reasons. The weather was terrible. The Canadians were terrible. In fact, the Canadians were worse than the weather. We lost our power. Everything was going wrong. And then here come the Yankees. Hallelujah. Weather still stinks, but the Yankees don't, so we're happy.
Well, are Browns fans saying hallelujah? Because I have to admit, I really didn't think it was going to be Baker Mayfield. But look, he's a phenomenal athlete. You know what he did at Oklahoma. I was just curious that when ownership takes a look at what they think they want to do, where they're going to go. Was Baker Mayfield the right choice for the Browns and where they're at right now in their organization?
Yeah, I mean, they got to solidify that position. You've got a general manager who knows about that and really knows how to do it. Now, that said, I was a little bit surprised they took Mayfield. I mean, I know what everyone was saying, that was where the signs were pointing, but I really thought Darnold was the best quarterback in this draft, the best guy to step into a pro huddle tomorrow and play. But they're not interested in the guy stepping in tomorrow. They can sit him for a while Tyrod Taylor plays and have him learn, and I understand that. But Baker Mayfield, he's a winner. I like that. I like his competitive edge, but I don't like the red flags off the field. Character's a huge deal for me. And I look at this guy and say, is he head and shoulders above everyone else? Is he the John Elway of this draft? No, he's not, and there are others there. And as I said, Darnold was the guy who immediately I looked at and I realized what happened last year. I was really high on him 2 years ago, not so much last year. We had a lot of new people around him, especially up front. Darnold, to me, was the better choice. We'll see what happens. I know some people made some comparisons to Johnny Manziel with Mayfield. I think that's a reach, but I don't think it's so much of a reach that you shouldn't do it. I think there's some signs there you go, I don't know. You better make sure you got their ground covered here. And the Browns and Dorsey apparently did. It wasn't so much that one that surprised me. It was the second pick. It was the fourth pick of the draft, but their second pick.
Yes.
When they took Denzel Ward. I thought they were taking Chubb. Turns out they were taking Chubb. Turns out it was Nick Chubb, the running back. And that was later. But Bradley Chubb there, I thought, this is a slam dunk. You got the best defensive player off the board. Boy, you come away with what you think is a franchise quarterback, and you better hope it is. I think they've had something like 28 starters since they came back in the league. And I look at Chubb, there's a guy you can pair as a bookend with your last first-round draft pick, and now you're really getting after the quarterback. I thought when they went for Ward, they went for a position of need. And then, the defensive coordinator said as much later that, Greg Williams said, yeah, that's what we were doing. That's dangerous when you do that at the top of the draft. I think it's really dangerous. It's really dangerous anytime, but especially with the fourth overall pick, to me, Chubb just jumped off the board there, and you go, this is easy. And that, to me, was the first stunner. I was surprised. Maybe it turns out that Ward's a terrific player, an all-pro. I don't know, but right now I looked at that and thought, taking a position need over the best player on the board, they always tell you, we took the best available player. Well, not here they didn't, and I think they probably should have.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I was just going to ask you about that, but you answered the question for me, so let's change it up a little bit and go into the minds of what the New York Giants were thinking in the number 2 spot. And let's go.
Right.
And I'm not going to talk about how you got to eventually replace a 37-year-old quarterback. But if the Giants know that the Jets were going to be needy for a quarterback, which obviously they are, and there's a number of of teams underneath them. Why wouldn't the Giants try parlaying that to the Jets, pick up some draft picks, and then still pick Barkley at number 3 or number 4, depending on when they go? It's almost like they were quite foolish of drafting this guy as fast as they were. Surprised everybody. Nice player, but did they really accomplish everything, and did they get the most out of that pick that they really could have?
Yeah, I think they did, to be honest with you. I don't have a problem there, and for this reason. I like teams that have a conviction about somebody. And, with Cleveland, if they have a conviction about Mayfield, terrific. Now, if it turns out he flunks, well, that's on them. But they have a conviction about Barkley, A, and B, I do think he was the best player in this draft. Now, it may not turn out to be the best player in the pros, but I think he and Quentin Nelson were the best players in this draft. And so if you believe that and you have a need, holy smokes, why don't you take him? And I think you're gambling if you move back down and say, well, we can get him later. You're not going to move very far because he's going to come off the board and someone will go up to get him. And they desperately need to get a running game in New York. Listen, my father-in-law has been a Giant season ticket holder for 50 years. He keeps telling me, where's the running game? Where's the offensive line? And that's what they addressed. They got the running back with the first pick. They got Hernandez, guard from UTEP, in the second round. And I thought they made smart moves there. Now, addressing your question, absolutely. What are you going to do with a quarterback? I mean, you got to find a successor and groom him, or you might find a successor immediately because Eli Manning is at or near the end of his career. I mean, guys, you watch the quarterback play, throughout the league. He's so far below what he should be if he's a starter, especially in that city. And yet he shows signs every so often of being, the Eli of the past, but there's too much bad Eli. And I think what Dave Gettleman's telling you is, listen, I think we can squeeze a couple more years out of him if we can protect him with a running game and an offensive line. He addressed both with the first 2 picks. You get the best running back in the draft. And I will say this, I do believe there's a resurgence, fortunately, because we've been saying for years, I think you've got to have a running game to be successful. I'm old school, but there's a resurgence in the way some of these guys look at running backs. Look at Leonard Fournette last year, 4th pick in the draft. Look at the year before, Ezekiel Elliott, 4th pick in the draft. Look at the year before that, Todd Gurley, 10th pick in the draft. Those guys help their clubs get to the top. And I think Dave Gettleman's saying, listen, in Carolina, I know what worked for us. Yeah, we had an MVP quarterback, but we ran the ball and we played defense. We've got what we think is a pretty decent defense. We're going to help it more. But we've got to help our quarterback with pieces around him that'll make him better. And I think with those first 2 draft picks, he did. And then they got Carter in the 3rd round, a pass rusher on the outside who should help them from Georgia. I thought what the Giants did at number 2 was the right choice, because I do believe when you're looking at a board and you say, this guy is number 1 on our board, as I said, I don't know what the Browns are looking at, but I would hope Baker Mayfield was the top guy on their board, certainly the top quarterback. But if you look at the board and say, this is the top guy, you have to take him. And that's why years ago, guys, remember when Detroit had that run of wide receivers? They took a wide receiver in 3 successive drafts. Yeah. People said they're crazy. Well, they missed for the 1st and 2nd, but the 3rd time it was Calvin Johnson, and people were saying you can't do it. And I remember being in New York at the draft. I said, no, you have to do it because he's the best player in this draft. Mm-hmm. You have to do it. And if you don't trade that away, you have to take him. They did, and to me, he turned out to be what I think will be a Hall of Fame wide receiver. But the same thing here. Saquon Barkley is Barkley sitting there. You need a running back. I do think you have to take him. I think it's the right pick.
We're in conversation with Clark Judge from the Talk of Fame Network here on Raw. Mike Richards, watching both live on YouTube and the website out of the DKI Canada Studios in downtown Toronto. You mentioned Bradley Chubb, so out of the Wolfpack, a guy that can cause a lot of problems on the defensive end. So I guess you'll have both him and Von Miller. And I think I thought it was interesting, Case Keenum, on what kind of year he's going to have. Does Denver have something going?
I'm sorry, just what?
Does Denver have something going with some of these moves that they have made? Are we going to see, a very different season with the Broncos this year?
Well, they would hope so. I mean, they were terrible last year, but I think what John Elway is trying to do here, and I'm trying to wind down from that Saquon Barkley. I was getting so emotional there. It was getting me fired up because my father-in-law is on me like the Giants. But I think what they're trying to do is recreate 2015 when they went to the Super Bowl and won the Super Bowl. I think that they're trying to get that back, and they're telling you that defense won that year when we beat Carolina. Defense was what all we were, We had quarterbacks who weren't real good, and that includes Peyton Manning. He wasn't very good that year. He had 9 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, and we all know what happened there. With an over-the-top defense and a defense that was very good against the pass, they were successful, so successful they rode that defense to the top of the league. So I think that's what he thinks he can do here. Case Keenum will reduce the number of turnovers. Turnovers kill these guys. And if they can do that and they can run the ball effectively and they've got their fingers crossed there, could they recreate that? Yeah, they think they could. Do I think that's going to happen? No, I don't. I think at some point you're going to have to get a better quarterback in there, but they're hoping that what you saw from Case Keenum last year is what you're going to get this season. We'll see. I mean, he did well in a situation in Minnesota where they did play lights out defense. I think always trying to recreate that in Denver and hoping that can happen again for his quarterback and for his team.
Clark, let's see if you and I are on the same page this Monday morning. Outside of the top 10, those top 10 players, they're all nice. They're all going to, do what they can for their new franchises. The rest of the first round, where was the number one mistake made by a team that did not address a need? I have a team in mind. Can you guess what team, or are we on the same page as far as what team did not address what they should have addressed with that first round pick?
Well, I'll go with I don't know that I'm this critical of the pick, but in terms of missing a need, I'd maybe go with Dallas. I thought Dallas needed a wide receiver, and there are 2 sitting there. There are no wide receivers off the board. You got Ridley sitting there.
Yeah.
They go for the linebacker. I understand why they went for why they took Van Der Esch. I understand that because Sean Lee is hurt, and they want to get the kid from Notre Dame up to NFL standards. I understand that, but at the same time, look at them and I say, you just lost Dez Bryant. Who are you going to have Prescott throwing the ball to? And so I thought that was a concern. I'm going way down the board. Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle was my pick. I wrote it down for Mike right here. It was Seattle.
Yeah.
Dallas was number 2 for me, just for everything you just said there, too. Totally makes sense. Dallas number 2, Seattle number 1 for me, considering what that defense looks like with the Seattle Seahawks. And you know what? Probably a third-place finish in that division at best.
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, it puts so much pressure on the quarterback. And I think this was Pete Carroll's way of saying, we want to take some of it off of him. Could you have gotten Penny in the second round? Yeah, you could have. I lived in San Diego and about him. And they said, this guy's going to be great. Maybe. But you have to have an offensive line in front of him, too, and they have needs. They have needs galore. And I didn't quite get that one. As I said, I think they could have gotten him in the second round. But that one surprised me. Those are 2 that come to mind.
Very good, yep.
What the Raiders did, I mean, the Raiders, what they did, they didn't they didn't get much for going from 10 to 15. I mean, Arizona paid a very weak price, about a third and a fifth to go from 5 spots down. But and then they got a tackle who may be a project, maybe a developmental guy. So I wasn't for sure what the Raiders were doing either, but do they have a need? Yeah, they do, but is this guy going to step in and be a starter immediately? I don't think so. So, but anyway, those 2 others, Dallas and Seattle, I think are probably the 2 that come to mind.
Well, the 2 Joshes that remain on the board, we heard the Josh Rosen. Look, I know that he's outspoken, and I know he's a very verbal guy. I know he's very intelligent, but I honestly did not see that coming. Where he's told the whole world, where for the next 10 years he's gonna torture the teams that didn't take before him. My jaw kind of hit the ground. Were you surprised at that comment?
Yeah, I was surprised, but knowing I say kid, I mean young man, knowing the young man, I wasn't. He is outspoken. He says what he thinks, and that's what he thinks. And more power to him. Listen, I was there in 2005 when Aaron Rodgers went downstairs and said the same thing. Said the same thing even from what we thought might be the first pick of the draft to 24th before Green Bay rescued him. He said the same thing, and you know what? He proved it. Well, now it's up to Josh Rosen to prove it. I mean, it's one thing to say it. You better go out and prove it now. And he is going to have that attached to his name wherever he goes from now on. When he has a bad game, when he has a good game, whatever, we're going to be evaluating him game by game, team by team. Whenever he plays a team that passed him in the draft, that's going to come up. So he'll get tired of hearing those questions. But I like the emotion. I'm not so sure I would have said it if I were myself, but I'm not Josh Rosen. That's who he is. And I think that what makes him an intriguing guy. But again, you now have to live up to the standards. You've set the bar pretty high. Okay, go do it. But this is also the guy that says, he wants to, or maybe he's going to win more Super Bowls than Tom Brady. Huh? What? What? Oh, well, okay, go. If you can do that, I think you can do that. I like the confidence, but now you have to go prove that you're a man of your word. You have to live up to those words. That's going to be tough.
Yeah, very, very tough. Curious to get your thoughts on the Ravens moving up to draft Lamar Jackson in the number 32 hole. Now this is an exact opposite of what Joe Flacco is at that starting quarterback. So they have two quarterbacks, an older one who still has some mileage on the tread, and a young one who is athletic, can play multi-positions if they wanted to. They drafted him as a quarterback. What goes into the thinking and reasoning with the Ravens drafting what is a very good athletic quarterback?
Well, again, I think they saw this guy sitting there and saying, listen, we can't believe he's still there.
Yeah.
Do we think he could be a special player? We do. Some people think he can be a special player no matter where he plays on the field. But this is a team that has been conflicted, I think, about Flacco recently. Fans are really down on him. I lived in Baltimore for years. Fans are down on Flacco because he hasn't been the quarterback he was in that 2012 season when he had the great playoff run. He won the Super Bowl, and he gets a big contract, and he hasn't lived up to that. And I think this is basically him saying, we're going to blow this thing up if you don't get your act together soon, and we're probably going to blow it up anyway. Is he sort of a different quarterback than Joe Flacco? Absolutely. Completely different. But keep in mind, guys, the offensive coordinator there, Marty Mornhinweg, had Michael Vick in Philadelphia. And he's not a lot different from Michael Vick. The same sort of versatile quarterback, very athletic, can run, can beat you with a pass. I think this may be a sign that they're going in a different direction. But again, the onus is on Flacco. Listen, I was in San Diego when San Diego drafted Phil Rivers, and Drew Brees was the quarterback, and he hadn't lived up to expectations. So Rivers was going to take over, right? Wrong. Because Brees responded, led the team to the division title. They kept him, and then, of course, the next year he hurt his shoulder, and they let him go in free agency, and we all know what happened. Rivers took over, and Rivers has been a great quarterback, but Brees went on to win a Super Bowl. I think it just depends here how Flacco responds, but eventually I think this guy's going to be his successor. Would it happen this year? I don't think so, but it may be next year. It's up to Flacco what he does in that offense, but I think this is a signal that sooner or later, and it may be sooner depending on how Flacco plays, we're going to blow this thing up and go in a different direction because we can do that. Marty's done that before in a different offense with a different franchise.
There are a lot of Bills fans in Southern Ontario. A lot of them go to the games. Josh Allen out of Wyoming, and of course his stories. The story's great. He's one of these guys out of high school that everyone ignored.
Right.
He worked real hard just to get a letter from anybody. He certainly has a huge arm. I guess the only question is playing at Wyoming, looking at the kind of year that Wyoming had in him himself personally. This was not him going out and throwing 5 touchdowns a game. This is not how that looked. So I'm just curious, what is your take on Josh Allen? What kind of pressure does this kid have? Because I am going to use the word kid in this circumstance to go into Buffalo and prove everyone that he is worthy of being a starting quarterback.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a ton of pressure on his shoulders. I think there's a lot more on a guy like Sam Darnold. The third pick of the draft. Josh McCown's the guy there sitting just waiting there, keeping the seat warm until Darnold's ready. You've got a guy in Buffalo, A.J. McCarron, who I think can start and win. I'm not talking about winning the division, but can win. I liked what little I saw of him in Cincinnati. The fact that the Bengals let him go tells you that they weren't sold on him. But let's face it, guys, they haven't won a playoff game since, 1991? They should have won one when he played, and they would have won one if a couple guys on their defense, including Burfict and Adam Pac-Man Jones, didn't lose their minds down the stretch. And, of course, they had the fumble, too. But he didn't lose that game. They lost the game. So I like McCarron. I think you can win some games with him. So, in the meantime, let this guy sit on the sidelines and learn. I like the story. I think he's perfect for Buffalo. He's every man. He's the lunch pail guy who just no one takes him seriously. Okay, all he does is go out and play really well, win some games at a place where they don't win a lot of games. The strong arm thing is what people pay attention to because Buffalo, it can be tough there in the winter, November, December, strong winds and all. I get that. I really worry about people who gush over strong arms. I saw it with Jamarcus Russell. I saw it especially in Baltimore with Kyle Bowler when they're talking about he threw a ball through the goalpost, through the uprights at 50 yards on his knees. I don't care. He's not going to be throwing the ball from his knees in the pros. And we know what happened with Bowler, and we know what happened with Jamarcus Russell. I don't place that much of an emphasis on arm strength. I think in Buffalo, yeah, it helps, but accuracy, much more important. Decision-making, leadership. To me, leadership's the biggest thing, and he seems to have it. So I don't think the pressure's on him immediately. He can sit and wait. But if and when McCarron struggles, yeah, there's going to be pressure from the public to put this guy on the field, simply because when you're the backup, you always look better than the guy who's struggling. But in the short term, I think he's in the right place at the right time. Give him some time to learn and then wheel him out there. But again, you've got a chance now with McCarron to see what you got with a quarterback who could have won a playoff game for Cincinnati and didn't through no fault of his own.
I also take it that you probably weren't one of those booing Giancarlo Stanton game number 4 at Yankee Stadium. Were you? Were you there? Were you booing? Was that you?
That was me. That was me. I don't know why they brought. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know why they brought him in. I really don't, because they've got so many young players. They've got so much talent, and I've seen it written in the tabloids there, and they're absolutely right. It's almost like they have an abundance, almost too much good talent. But you're seeing it right now. Gleyber Torres is at second. They brought the kid at third base, Andujar, who's playing very well. They've got Clint Frazier in left field. Like, apparently they want to give him another year. But all these guys who, Billy McKinney was a good player, got hurt, and they brought him up, got hurt. But they've got a lot of really good young players, and they give you energy and life and bat speed and all that. And why would you bring in a guy with, who hits a ton of home runs and strikes out a lot? I realized the MVP, but I thought you're disrupting the team chemistry. To me, it was somewhat like what happened when A-Rod came on. So I know he's a different kind of guy, but boy, when I watch those games, he drives me crazy. I mean, I hope he comes around. I'm not a big fan. I like speed. I like singles. I like guys who keep the ball between the lines. I'm not a big home run strikeout guy. I mean, heard something last night. It's astounding, guys. There are going to be more strikeouts for the major leagues in April than there were base hits. That's astounding. And it's the first time in Major League Baseball history. More strikeouts throughout the league than there are base hits. I'm not used to that kind of game, but that's the way it's become. It's become a power game. And I think listening to Paul O'Neill say this one time, and I agree with him, the game's best when it's played between the lines, singles, doubles, stealing, hit and run, that sort of thing. That's what I love about baseball. I don't like the hit or miss guys, and that's who Stanton is. And Judge is somewhat that way too, except A, he hits for an average, and B, he's got my last name, so I love him.
There you go.
Thanks a lot, Clark. Great talking and catching up with you. It's been a while, but it's so awesome to have you back on the show again.
Oh, it's great to hear your voices, guys. Thanks for checking in.
That is Clark Judge from the Talk of Fame Network.
What? Did we just become best friends?
Yep.